I'm going to be telling you the scary story of the house I lived in elementary and middle school. It was a 3-bedroom house, 1 bedroom in the basement and 2 bedrooms upstairs. Because I was the oldest, I got put in the bedroom in the basement. Right when we moved in, I already had creepy feelings about the house. I hated being downstairs by myself. One day I dropped a $20 bill behind my dresser. I decided to move my dresser all by myself, and behind the dresser was this door. It wasn't a normal door, it was really short and just squared. It was also glued off, so I couldn't get into it. Me and my neighbor, who were best friends, worked at it for days to get into it. We finally got it open, and inside was another room. It was almost like an underground attic. The walls were wooden, the ceiling was wooden, there was no carpet, but it smelled awful. My parents found out and they were super mad at me for opening the room. They of course put that dresser in front of that door for a reason because they knew I would explore it. But after that, things started to get weird. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of my scary childhood story about the door behind my dresser. Of course, my parents were really mad at us for opening it up, so they sealed it back up. They just didn't want us to get hurt from all the rusty nails or if there was mold inside. But I think we released something when we opened that door and a lot of things started to happen. First, I started having night terrors to the point where I would scream at the top of my lungs and not wake up. My parents would have to come downstairs and wake me up and put me back to bed. Then, every single night I would have this reoccurring dream that me, my mom, and my brother were all at a picnic at the beach. This super old lady would walk up to us and she would take me. She then would lock me up in the room behind my dresser. This dream would reoccur every single night for months. It scared me so much that I started to not sleep at night. I developed insomnia and would only sleep for 2 to 3 hours per night at only 8 years old. There was a couple nights where I swear I saw the old lady standing in the corner of my room. My parents just thought I was hallucinating from no sleep though. Stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of my scary childhood story about the door behind my dresser. Because I wasn't sleeping and developed insomnia, my parents took me to a sleep therapist. The only thing the therapist gave me was a bunch of sleeping pills. Even though the sleeping pills worked, it made my dreams so much worse. I even started walking in my sleep. I would wake up all the time not in my bed. My covers would be all the way across the room like someone had dragged them over there. One night, one of my best friends slept over and we heard knocking coming from the door behind my dresser. That night when we went to bed, she started speaking really creepy gibberish in her sleep. I had to go get my mom to wake her up. I woke up a couple nights feeling like I was suffocating, and when I swung out of bed, I saw a silhouette of an old lady. My cat even started to sit there and meow and hiss at random things in the corners of the room. But there was nothing ever there. It got so bad to the point where I moved up into my brother's room. If any of you have listened to all 3 parts and are experts on spirits, please message me on Instagram and tell me what you think I released that night when I opened the door.
This is a Vidiq. You might recognize it from this video that surfaced in 2018 of Post Malone touching it inside of Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, and most of us know that didn't end well.
But what is a Vidiq, and why is it considered the most haunted item in the world? The Vidiq is a wine box that was purchased in 2001 by an American man at an estate sale in Spain. When the man learned that the item was a family heirloom, he offered to return it to the family, but they insisted that he keep it. The box was purchased by the family's grandmother after the Holocaust had ended, but it sat unopened inside of her sewing room because the grandmother was convinced a Vidiq was inside of it. Vidiq is a demon that has the ability to possess different items. When the American man brought the box home, he opened it up, and this is what was inside. Inside the box, there were 2 locks of hair, a single candle holder, 2 pennies from the 1920s, and a small statue with the Hebrew word peace inscribed. Like for part 2.
This is a Vidiq box, and it's said to be responsible for putting a curse on Post Malone.
In part 1, I explained to you what the Vidiq box is and where it came from. When Post Malone encountered the Vidiq box inside of Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, he claimed to have seen a black shadow following them throughout the night. But that's not all. The months following his encounter with the Vidiq box has led many people to believe he was cursed. Post Malone took a jet from Orange County to London. The tires on the jet blew out. It spent 5 hours in air circling around in order to make a safe landing. A home in San Fernando was broken into by 3 armed men, but thankfully it was his previous address. He ended up totaling his car in a serious rollover crash and claims to have found bite marks on him. If you don't believe me, check this out.
Apparently there's a thing called the Vidiq box. My plane almost crashed. I was in a car accident. My house got robbed and I had bite marks on my arm.
Scary Things Police Have Seen, Part 25. One night, 2 officers were dispatched to an old office building that had been converted to a doctor's office. They were set to meet a key holder there to let them in regarding a motion sensor that had gone off. When they arrived, the key holder was already there and he let them in. They left the key holder on the first floor while they went to the second floor where the motion sensor had gone off. After they cleared the building, they went back down and found the key holder was gone. The officers asked dispatch to try to get a hold of the key holder so that they can tell him that the building was clear. Dispatch told the officers that was impossible because the key holder hadn't even arrived yet. The key holder was still about 10 minutes away. After the 10 minutes was up, a different person arrived and was confused on how the officers got in the building. They gave a description of the first key holder to her, and she told them that was a doctor that had committed suicide several days prior.
This is the most haunted house in New Orleans and possibly in all of America, the Lalaurie Mansion. This story is disturbing, so buckle up. This is Madame Lalaurie. She lived in the house with her family. 2 of her husbands died in the past, and people think she murdered them. She was played once by Kathy Bates on American Horror Story if you've seen Coven. But that's not the only dark thing that surrounds this house. Apparently, Madame Lalaurie had a torture chamber for her slaves upstairs, and the things that happened in that room I can't describe on this TikTok. You can look them up yourselves. No one in New Orleans understood what was happening inside of the house, but they eventually found out when one of the slaves set a fire in the kitchen in an attempt to take their own life. Also, a girl jumped from one of these windows to her death to escape Madame Lalaurie and was supposedly buried on the grounds. Paranormal events reported here include being attacked, pushed, shoved, hearing voices, and someone was even murdered by a ghost.
I am going to be telling you a scary childhood story. When I was 2 years old, my mom passed away. My dad wasn't in the picture, so I went to go live with my grandparents. My grandparents lived in a super old home that was built in the 1800s. I was a very imaginative child. So when I told my grandparents that I used to see people in the house, they just didn't believe me. There was one lady in particular that I would always see. She would sit at the end of my bed and watch me fall asleep. I wasn't scared of her because I thought she was an actual person. Plus, I was super little, so nothing even crossed my mind. At this point, I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember her talking to me constantly. She even sang me the song Rockabye Baby to get me to go to bed one night. Every single day when I would get home, I could see her in my window. At that point, I thought she was just waiting for me. She just wanted to be my friend, right? But as I got older, things started to get really weird between me and her. She wasn't this nice lady anymore. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of the lady in my room who would sing me lullabies to get me to go to bed. No one else in my family could see her. She even told me that she was my mom. I really believed her. If you remember, my mom passed away when I was 2. So, it seemed pretty real that it was my mom. I didn't really remember what my mom's face looked like when she passed away. And this lady, could be my mom. She continued to sing me lullabies every single night when I would go to bed. She would always be waiting for me in the window when I would get home from school. But I figured out pretty quickly it wasn't my mom. My mom was a sweet, kind-hearted person. This spirit was evil. She would get mad at me every single time any of my friends would come over. She told me she could see my future and that I was going to go to hell after I died in a car accident. It scared me so much, but no one believed me. It got to the point where I never even wanted to go in the car because I thought I was going to die. She convinced me I was evil. Stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of the lady who used to sing me lullabies to get me to go to bed. This spirit was evil, and she started to convince me that I was evil too. She convinced me that I would go to hell because I was a horrible child, even though I wasn't. She convinced me that every single person in my life hated me. She even started to control my dreams, and I would wake up every single night screaming at the top of my lungs from a night terror, and she would be sitting at the end of my bed. This went on for years. When I turned 9, my grandpa passed away. And because it was a really big house, me and my grandma moved to a different house. And the evil spirit was just gone. I never saw her again. But was she really gone? When I was 15, I went to a psychic. The moment I walked into the room, she could feel a dark energy enter the room. She told me that someone was following me every single step I took. And when she said that, I knew exactly what she was talking about. After that, I went to a medium, and after many sessions with her, the dark presence was finally gone.
This is the real-life story of Annabelle. In 1970, a young female nursing student was gifted an Annabelle doll by her mom, who found it at a second-hand store. Girl instantly noticed weird things happening with the Annabelle doll, like it moving positions and even random notes showing up in her house saying, "Come find me." The girl then decided to call a medium, which ended up being Lorraine Warren, and Lorraine told them they really didn't have anything to worry about and that this doll was just taken over by a little girl's spirit who died. But when the doll started doing very malicious things, Lorraine took back her words and said, "This is not the spirit of a little girl, but rather a demon." The doll was then taken back with Ed and Lorraine to their occult museum and locked inside of a glass case. But then things just got even worse. You see, a lot of people taunted this doll and knocked on the glass and did anything they could because they didn't believe this doll was going to do anything to them. But turns out every person that messed with this doll ended up dying in some tragic death. Now it just sits there in a glass case by itself.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 21. This photo shows 8-month-old Zhao Bao, who was lucky to be alive because his mother stabbed him 90 times after he bit her while she was breastfeeding him. The world's scariest haunted house, McCamey Manor, requires you to sign a 40-page waiver and undergo a physical and mental evaluation. If you manage to make it through the house, you could win $20,000, but to this day, no one has ever made it through. The little girl who voiced Ducky in The Land Before Time was shot to death by her father, who then committed suicide. Roman Emperor Nero had a boy castrated, dressed him up as a bride, and married him, all because the boy looked similar to his previous dead wife. A 46-year-old man found and attacked a 13-year-old boy because the kid was killing him too many times in a game of Call of Duty.
Creepy facts you probably didn't want to know. Part 4. No one knows who lives in this house, named the John Lawson House. Every day, this porch is occupied by a varying number of female mannequins. The number of mannequins, the positions that they're in, and the clothes that they're wearing changes from day to day. No one knows who's moving them or why. However, people do believe that the mannequins are there to convey a message. In 1871, a train crashed just 200 feet away from this house. It killed 22 people. And for some reason, the mannequins are always pointing in the direction of the crash.